the relative amount of reservoir oil and reservoir gas being produced. This is actually used in the AR Manual 14 in Carolina. Okay, and then finally, I don't have time, but basically this is just a comment. The question is, why would we change the well classification? Okay, there could be a number of reasons. You could have depletion, creating a secondary gas cap. That wouldn't probably happen in a conventional reservoir, but you could have depletion caused by the parent wells and the child wells coming in later, so you could have partial depletion. And then you could use definitions that are not reliable in terms of defining what's a reservoir, a oil well and a gas well. But in general, to change the classification of the well should really require that you have a mapping over time how the well type characteristics, basically the percentage of the reservoir oil that's producing as a function of time, should give the information needed to define whether a well is changing from gas to oil or oil to gas. So that's basically what I want.
Hi, Danny English from Shell Canada. Whenever we do PVT studies and unconventionals, I'm worried about the sampling. Because if your reservoir is close to dew point and you start producing, you might go through the dew point and the heavier components drop out as liquids and actually get stuck in your 100 Andalusia rock. So the sample that you get is a gas that's missing the heavier components. Is there any, and that's, then you do your lab stuff on it and build your US one. Is there any trick up your sleeve where you can tell that this actually happened to you, that you have a non-representative sample?
I guess it depends what you're talking about, non-representative. I mean, in situ, non-representative.
No, the sample that you take has a different composition than the reservoir
in-situ
fluid, because some of it dropped out in the reservoir and got stuck because of capillary pressures or something.
Right. That's difficult to know for certain that you have a sample that's not representative of what's in the reservoir. The question is, do we really know that there's a single homogeneous fluid composition in the reservoir? That's the first question. And the red flag is that if the saturation pressure is higher, and substantially higher than the reservoir pressure, it's not because of bad sampling. For sure.
I love phase diagrams a lot. So when I try to make sense of something here, I get asked this question a lot, especially if, let's stay down the Appalachia, but, when it comes to the PVT and having it be two-phase, how does the fluid window impact the design, let's say, of stage spacing or any of these other kind of completion designs? Is there a correlation that's going to make sense? To me, there is, because if we're trying to manage pressure in such a way that we capitalize on all the good stuff, to me, there would be some type of correlation. But I'm not sure I'm hearing that a lot. Am I just off in left field there?
Well, you're thinking about trying to complete into a higher or lower GOR part of the DSU.
Okay.
Or you're talking about the entire area, your acreage.
And just what I'm trying to do is trying to understand, again, this is probably for getting more of a Marcellus type of conversation, but staying in that part of the phase diagram, especially with something that's, where you have a lot of water, staying in that part of the phase diagram, you're giving your completion design. So your stage spacing would affect that takeaway, would also then affect pore space, et cetera, et cetera. I'm trying to make that connection. And again, maybe I'm off in left field here. I'm just asking a stupid question to it. What is oil field trash, as you called yourself? That's what you said in the beginning. How does oil field trash get to Calgary? Here you are.
Okay. So if you're in a region of the reservoir where you believe it's single phase, and you have maybe variations from DSU from area to area of GOR, then you just have to do mapping of the GOR difficult to see the depth variation in these wells, what that might be. And in that case, if you're looking for a lower GOR to make more liquids, then you would have to map that out, and you would have to drill and complete it in those areas. But in these areas where it's clearly two phases initially that you're drilling through, you're fracking into, the only way you can identify should we complete higher structure, mid structure, lower structure to bring the OGR, to bring the GOR down, to make more oil and less gas, if that's your intention. It's pure empiricism. There's no way we'll know the distribution of the reservoir gas and reservoir oil in the rock itself. I don't think there's any way that we'll see that. And then you just have to start mapping it well to well to see what kind of completions, where are we landing the wells that give us the lowest GORs, the most oil.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Question. I mean, this is an intriguing topic, and I kind of visualize it when you're above the two-phase envelope around the critical point. It obviously really doesn't matter whether you call it oil. It's a single-phase dense fluid of some that doesn't really change your properties. The key thing about the critical point is if you're on the bubble point side of it, the emergent phase is less dense than the main fluid.
Right.
Whereas if you move in temperature above the critical point, the emergent phase is more dense.
Right.
And that seems to be the whole crutch of the matter. If the emergent phase is more dense, then it's less likely to move, right?
Yes. I mean, if you're on the gas condensate on the dew point side, and it's single phase, or the part of the reservoir you're producing that is a gas condensate dew point, what will happen in these unconventionals, and this is fairly well documented in a number of papers, is that the condensate that drops out within the pores will not flow into the wellbore. And that comes to this topic we were talking about earlier today about, Michelle was talking about, opening the wells up to get the highest rates possible. You can do that in a dry gas well without any detrimental effect. You get higher gas rates. But if you do that in a gas condensate, then you very well likely could go from 100 barrels per million to 20 barrels per million in the first 3 months and never return back to the 100 barrels per million ever. So you have to basically assess whether you want to do the hard drawdown or not.
Whereas if you're on
the oil side, there's less of that effect. And this is, like I said, documented in some papers. That's right.
Just a question, Dr. Whitson, about whether any of your work is attempting to quantify the transmissivity degradation due to phase changes in situ. Is that even a chance of investigating that kind of
The loss of
transmissivity?
Okay, so like mobility loss.
Mobility.
Yeah. That really is what we're talking about here. If you're on the gas...
Is there any way to quantify what's happening to you now?
Well, first you'll see the CGR dropping rapidly as the bottom of flood pressure drops below the dew point. That's because the mobility of the condensate just won't be sufficient to have it flowing like in a conventional reservoir. The loss of there's not a lot of loss of gas mobility. That's shown in these publications I was referring to. Even though you get this condensate building up, it's not building up very close to the hydraulic fracture. It's basically dropping out wherever it drops out, and it stays there. So it's more distributed out. So it's not as severe. It's not like a condensate blockage effect, the same way as in a conventional reservoir. So it's actually less of a mobility hit in unconventionals than it is in conventional.
Christian Stavik rule. Do you believe that there's a certain range of CGRs that you see at the wellhead or any other indicative property such as CGR that would lead you to believe you have retrograde condensate behavior, i.e. liquid dropout in the reservoir? Is there any range of CGR that